Okay, we're back. One other thing about the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation is that there were also no executive or judicial branches, so nobody to enforce the law, and certainly nobody to interpret the law. The Articles of Confederation did accomplish a few things, and let's briefly go through them. One of the things that happened after the Revolutionary War was that there were a number of territories out here that these states over in the east were interested in acquiring. And you can tell all of this land east of the Mississippi River was heavily being sought after. And so the question was, how do you effectively divvy up this land, and how do you make it fair for settlement, and at some point, if these become states, how do they become states? So the Articles of Confederation government was tasked with doing that. And so one of the big accomplishments was called the Land Ordinance of 1785 in this period, which basically divided up small chunks of land into 6 by 6 mile blocks. And what this did is it created what's called a township of 36 square miles. And this was a nice way of, if you're going to create a town or divvy up land, this is a nice way to do it. And this was an important part of what was going on. 1787, you have what's called the Northwest Ordinance relating to this area called the Northwest Territory. One of the major accomplishments of the Confederation Congress, and what they decided is once enough people move in here into these areas, you have statehood that's achieved in 3 stages. Number 1, Congress is going to appoint 3 judges and a governor to govern the territory. Okay. Secondly, when the population reaches 5,000 adult male landowners, they're allowed to elect a territorial legislature. Thirdly, when the population reaches 60,000, now notice it says not adult male landowners, but when the total population reaches 60,000, you can elect delegates to a state constitutional convention. Okay? And those are the steps to achieve statehood. So basically you have to have the magic number of 60,000 to become a state, and then at that point you will be admitted into a state. And so what they were basically doing is they were planning for growth. If we go back to the previous slide, that's essentially what they're doing too, is trying to make it fair for people to settle in these lands. Because if you're coming over from Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or something and you're going to settle here, you have to have structure. You can't have people just settling wherever they want to without having some sort of government structure. So really what they were doing is they were planning for growth. Here's this slide again. And so therefore, look at what you have. You have the United States in 1787 pretty much settled over here. All of this area that we now know as Middle America, this is all just basically the frontier. And you can tell that there are certain areas that are settled in all of this. Now there is trouble brewing because of something that's happening up in Massachusetts. And let's talk a little bit about Daniel Shays. Daniel Shays is basically a person very much angered by the debt and the taxes that the state governments are levying on small farmers. And so what happens is you got this massive rebellion that takes place among the farmers led by Daniel Shays. And it takes place up in western Massachusetts here. And it is a classic incident where you have a lot of people that are angry at the government, and the government has no power to stop the rebellion. And that's why this is such a significant event. You know, basically what happens is it's such a mess and such a disorder where a lot of things happen, which is very a lot of violence. I mean, you have farmers going after the state government houses in Massachusetts, and again, since the Articles of Confederation can't call out a militia, there's just no way that they can stop it. And look at this quote by George Washington. He says, "There could be no stronger evidence of the want of energy in our governments than these disorders." Shays' Rebellion makes it clear to the rest of the nation that if we're going to stop these disorders and we're going to stop these rebellions, because it's going to keep happening, we need to have a stronger central government. And that's what starts in 1787. There's widespread consensus that we need a constitutional convention to construct a new government that's going to work. And what type of government did the founders create? That's the next question. Well, here's what they did. In 1787, they met in the brotherly city of Philadelphia. And what they set out to do was to improve the Articles of Confederation. But another option on the table was that the Constitution, a new Constitution, a new system of government could be made. Rhode Island was the only one that didn't attend, but there were 55 delegates that attended. 55 delegates, and I must say that most of them were very wealthy individuals. We're talking slave owners, businessmen, people like that. Leaders of the convention. George Washington, of course, being the hero of the Revolutionary War, asked to preside over the convention. James Madison, often called the father of the Constitution, a small man, but a big mind. And he's the man, as we'll see, most responsible for giving us the structure of government that we have. The men who wrote the Constitution are called the Founding Fathers. We're talking about James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, people that are on money, and there's a reason for that. Everybody at the convention was wealthy, white males, and basically that's the one thing that they did agree on. Because again, the 13 states now were like 13 different countries, and it was going to be very difficult to come to a consensus. Here's a picture, a very famous picture of the Constitutional Convention, painted shortly after. Issues that divided the nation's leaders. Well, what divided them? Of course, the power of the federal government. How much power should it have? Would the states or the federal government have the most power? Because in the Articles of Confederation, the states have all the power, and that's not working out too well to stop rebellions or to pay debt. It's difficult. The issue of representation in Congress, with how many members in Congress would each state get. Small states wanted equal representation, and large states wanted it to be determined by the population of the states. And that makes sense. If you're a small state, you want equality because you're the little guy. If you're the big states, you want more representation because you can have more power that way. And then, of course, the big issue that's going to define American politics for a very, very long time after this is slaves and slavery. So, how would slaves be counted? Are they going to be counted in representation? What percentage of a person? Are they a full person? Are they 1/2 of a person? Are they whatever? And would the slave trade be able to continue? Remember, slavery is mostly in the South, so it's a regional issue. So these are the issues that divided the nation's leaders, and in the next lecture we'll talk about the Constitution and what it did.